Hello, I am Dara Lubin, and this is a tutorial video on how to use RenPy. Now, I will be showcasing a project that I made on RenPy and a bit about how you can make one of these types of projects yourself. All right, let's start up the project and let's walk through it. So, you hit the start button, and this is just a storyline that I created, and I guess you're a scout and you're on this trip with a ranger exploring the very quote unquote very sacred forests of Oregon. And it's a very pretty normal visual novel. All right, you just click through each of the different choices until you end up with decisions you have to make. And in this particular game that I created, each decision you do does impact the storyline, which means if I choose to dip into the river and let's say, yep, I gain pneumonia. In a previous instance, if I didn't go in the river, I would not have gained pneumonia. And that would impact the story a little differently, and you will see later on. Okay, so he tells me about the forest and how it's dangerous. All right, now this right here, he kind of talks about how, you shouldn't take risks because I know that you like to jump into rivers that you shouldn't be doing, right? If I didn't jump into the river, he would not have said this. But I'll also show what he would have said if I didn't jump in the river after. Okay, so yeah, we have two choices here. We can either go deeper in the woods or we can admire from a safe distance, but we're feeling a little risky today, so we're gonna go deeper in the woods. All right, we notice a bear sitting peacefully. It notices you. You start backing away slowly. Now you start sprinting back to the ranger, but you got pneumonia and you experience shortness of breath and extreme fatigue. You end up tripping over a trap and getting caught. And then the bear starts clawing away at you, and then you die. All right, and now we're back at the start screen. So let's see how the game would go if you act a little differently. Okay, we can speed through this. All right, let's not go in the river. All right, let's just be cool, be normal. Okay. And as you can see, it's a little different, right? He didn't say, oh, I know you like jumping in rivers, because I did not jump in a river. And okay, and as you can see, the text here is also a little different, right? It's a lot more nice, or it's a lot more calm and peaceful. So let's proceed into the woods anyways, though, and see what would happen. So, okay, we still notice a bear, though. All right, it still notices us. But now we start sprinting to the ranger, right? You notice a trap, right? You don't have pneumonia, right? So you notice this trap. And then you attempt to lure the bear into it, and then you successfully catch the bear in the trap, and then make your way back to the ranger. The ranger is happy to see you back in one piece, and he decides it's time to end the tour for the day. All right, bit of a conclusion from the ranger, right? Looking for a good Yelp review. And he also takes tips. Now, that's a very basic, very generic visual novel that I created. So let's kind of dive into how I kind of made this. All right, so the thing about RenPy is that it has its own scripting software. Well, our scripting language, I should say. And it's very close to Python, but it's called RPI. I think it's called like RenPython. That's probably what the language is called, but all right, let's click into script.rpi and just check out what it looks like. And let's select Visual Studio Code. Timeout. Is it want me to install this? Oh, okay, let's use... Oh, okay, so this is like an integrated one. I mean, like, if you would like to use this, feel free. but I will be using my own Visual Studio Code. Okay, now this here is the script. We start off by defining R to be the ranger. And when you define R to be a character, that pretty much means whenever you have a line that starts with this character, let's say R, and then text after, when you are playing the game, it'll look like that character that is symbolized by this little letter here. That character is the one who's talking, right? So if this character is Ranger, and it says R, hey scout, blah, 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 you'll see that the Ranger is actually the one who is talking, right? Hey scout, glad you could join us, right? Same format as right here. And I have another variable here I've defined as pneumonia. And this is, as you may be able to tell, how we keep track on if the player has pneumonia or not. Now, obviously, the player does not start off with pneumonia, so we set this as false initially. And then the game will start in this line. Now, I'll kind of explain a bit about the format that RenPy uses. It uses a label system, right? So what I mean by that is whenever the game is going to start, we always start with the start label, right? That's always going to happen. But there's other labels that we can create. Let's say we create the label where we jump in the river, right? Now this means, okay, we're going to jump pretty much to a whole different block of code. And I'll kind of fast forward from the start to where we actually jump to this label, and we go right here. So when we decide to jump in the river, and I'll kind of fast forward to where we decide to do that. And if we click on this button, we will jump to this label. That's pretty much what it means to click on this button, right? It jumps to this label. And then when it jumps to this label, we get this text here that is within this block, right? It's like a function that's being run, right? The jump in the river function. And then it prints text that says some part of you knew you shouldn't have done this. And as you can see, there is no ranger here, right? I kind of wanted to make it seem like you're talking to yourself, or like this is like your subconscious speaking. And in order to do that, you just don't include any variables here, and you just have text. Okay. So if you want it to seem like no one is actually speaking, you just put text there, and then add maybe you could probably just hit a space in the next text and it'll probably work the same, but I like to format it like this. And then the next text is going to happen when you click, and then it says you gain pneumonia, right? There is no ranger, it's just you speaking to yourself. And then once you click from here, it'll run the next line. But since this isn't a text, once this is done, it'll just run right into the jump exhibit 2 label. And this is how we define or set variables that we already have. We have to use this dollar symbol and then type out the variable name and then set it equal to something. So right, since we jumped in the river, we want to set this equal to true because we gained pneumonia. And as we've seen before, now we jump into a different label and a whole different scene happens. But we will get to this later. Let's go right from the beginning and then go line by line and figure out what's happening here. So let me just go back, all the way back to the beginning. Okay, here we go. Oh, here we go. So yeah, so from the label start, we do scene starting room, okay? Now, as you can see from the text here, right, this is pretty much how we show the background, right, the background image, because this guy isn't actually included in the background. He is one of the foreground images that we can add on to the background or add onto the screen, excluding from the background. So the background here is like a, it's a little backdrop of Oregon, and I've called it starting room, but it is actually a file that exists inside of the folder of the game. As you can see, this is this uses a placeholder by default. Okay, but we have changed this, so it doesn't actually, yeah. So named either blah, 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 but in this case, we have named it starting room dot png or dot jpeg. I guess I'll put this here, or dot, no, thank you for the autocorrect, or dot jpeg. And this is pretty much saying, okay, if we want to include a new scene, which is a new backdrop, let's look in the images directory, right? Images directory. And let's look for a file that has starting room in it, right? It could be either PNG or JPEG, doesn't matter. But let's look for a file that has starting room. And if we go into the, oh my goodness, if we go into the game, if I could find it, should be right here, yes. And we go into images, we'll see that starting room is right here, and it's a JPEG, right? It's a JPG file. And since this is the new scene, this is gonna be the new background. Next up, we're gonna show the ranger, right? We're gonna show the foreground image, all right? So in this case, we want to be the ranger. And before he starts speaking, we want to make sure he's on the screen. Because let's say that we said show ranger after he says all of this text here, right? And when we restart, and once we start, we'll see that the ranger isn't here anymore, right? But after this line of text, after let me know if you have any questions, there he is. Oh, and he's gone now. But that's because that's because of another reason. But yeah, pretty much you always want to show your character before they start speaking. And in order to show the character, you just say show, and the image of your character, just the name of the image. It's the same thing with starting room. This could be a PNG or a JPEG. In this case, this ranger is a PNG file, and it's transparent background. So the background is always going to be Oregon here. So let me reset how it was before and then restart RenPy. And launch the project. Okay. Now this is looking a lot better, right? This looks more so like you're actually being told a story from a character. All right, let's go back in the script and run through exactly what's going on here. So after he says, let me know if you have any questions about whatever, we have a new scene, right? A new background, new text. Let's examine what's going on here. So after you click, it goes to the next line. The next line says scene exhibit 1. All this means, very similar to this, you are just finding the image that says exhibit 1, which is right here, and you are setting it to the background. That's all you're doing. And the reason that the ranger is no longer being shown here is because we go to a new scene, right? A new scene means everything gets reset. So if I did not have this here, it would have to pretty much skip until the next line and then the next statement. Same with the beginning of the game, right? When you started, yes, there was a new scene, but it didn't just stop there. It went to the next line. It stops at the next line of dialogue. I'll show you if you don't exactly know what I'm talking about, but when you restart the game, there's always going to be text. All right, it'll always jump to the next text. All right, here it is. Even though it doesn't explicitly say, oh, jump to the text. Nope, it'll always avoid, or it won't stop at the scene line. It'll continue until you get to a text line. So if we go to Exhibit 1, we'll see that it stops here. It doesn't show the ranger yet because it stops at this line. And then if we click, all right, there we go. We show the ranger, and then we stop at the next line of dialogue. We click, and then the next line of dialogue. And if we click again, you'll see that we have the choices here, and I'll get to what that is, but real quick, you'll notice I had to hit hide ranger because otherwise the ranger would still be in the background because we didn't change the scene at all. All we are doing is adding different options to choose from. So when we add options to choose from, we have to use this menu format. And oh, very nice of them to include this in the in this little box here. But yes, what menu does is it allows you to create different options for the player to choose from. And when you click on the option, everything after the colon will be ran. So let's say I clicked on you decide to jump, take a dip in the river. And as I mentioned before, it will jump to this label and it will do all of the things that we discussed previously. But the most important part is that once it jumps to this label, it will not interact with anything else until this is finished. What I mean by that is when I hit jump in or take a dip in the river, it'll jump to this label. Then it says some part of you knew you should have blah, blah, blah. And then it says you gain pneumonia. But when I click it again, oh yes, oh, okay, well, okay, yeah, sure. When I click it again, I jump to the next label and it completely like disregards everything else in here because I don't return to this statement now. Once I'm out of this label, I don't come back, right? Unless I explicitly say I want to come back, right? So once I was here and now I'm here. And it's almost like start never even existed, right? Because now I'm jumped in the river. And then after I have done these 2 lines of dialogue, I now jump to Exhibit 2. All right. And now we've left all of this in the past. And now we're on to the Exhibit 2 label. And it's very similar structure, except in this one, we have things in the store that are happening that are dependent on if we have pneumonia or not. And I'll get to kind of what I mean by that very soon, but let's just go line by line. So starting at the label, we change the scene to Exhibit 2, right, which is this image in the images folder. And then we say, okay, this forest here used to be home to X, Y, and Z. And then, oh, we show the ranger, and then he says, yada, yada, yada. Now, this is the important part. If I did not have pneumonia, he would not have said the statement. Instead, he would have said, similar with the last exhibit, I caution you to look out for any traps. But since I have pneumonia, and what I mean by I have it is the pneumonia variable is true, right? Because we set it to true here. Since this variable is true, this is what's going to run. This line or the following lines of dialogue until you get to the else, right? Everything inside of the if will run. And then once I am done with the last dialogue in the if, I go out of this if statement, which means I also go out of the else statement because the else is only going to run if pneumonia is false. So once this is finished, I skip down to hide ranger. And then I continue until the next line of dialogue. So if I click here, it'll hide the ranger. And then the next line of dialogue is actually an option, right? It's two options here. It's a menu. Which means, okay, and let's understand what this means. So since I have pneumonia in this example, I will only be focused on the following lines of code. Everything else is obsolete, right? The else statement does not apply because I have pneumonia in this case. And if I did not have pneumonia, then the else would be the stuff that is running. So since I have pneumonia, we go back to the choices, right? We have two choices. We either go deeper in the woods or we decide to finally listen to the ranger. Very similar to the last one, where we decided to either take a dip in the river or to heed the warning, right? Very similar. We can either jump to this label or jump to this label. Very similar stuff, right? If I click go deeper in the woods, I jump to woods 1. If I click decide to finally listen to the ranger, I jump to the end. And real quick, I'll just jump to the end real quick because I actually haven't shown you if you just click on this one. But yeah, it literally just concludes. It's almost like nothing else in the story is important, and he just concludes the tour. All right, pretty simple stuff. We've already seen this before. Now, just so that we can finish the whole story, like code base. If I jump into the woods or jump to woods 1 label, I will start in this line, right? It'll show the bear sitting, which is a PNG that I have here. And then it'll have the text, you notice a bear sitting peacefully on the ground, which is exactly what's happening here. When you click, it hides the bear sitting and shows the bear walking. Now, the important thing about this line is that if I just said show bear walking, I would have two images of the bear on the screen. I would have it sitting and I would have it walking. But we do not want that, right? It's sloppy work. That would not be the work of art that we have created here. So we want to avoid that. And in order to avoid it, all we have to do is hide the previous image and then show the next image we want. And then it says it notices you, and then you click the next line, you start backing away slowly. The next line, you start sprinting, and then we hide the bear walking. And then we have dialogue that is based on if you have pneumonia or not. Now in this case, we do have pneumonia, so it will play the following lines. And obviously, as you may already know, if we did not have pneumonia, it will play these following lines. And pretty simple stuff here. We'll just, since we have pneumonia, right, we run the following lines. And then it shows the bear attack, and then you are just getting clawed away and you pass away. And if you did not have pneumonia, it would show the alternative ending that we have also ran through, and then we will end the game. Whew, that is pretty much it. I believe everything that I've shown you here is all you really need to make any type of game in RenPy that isn't too complicated or that isn't the most optimized it can be, I guess. But yeah, this is a tutorial on how to make a game in RenPy, and I hope that you enjoyed it.